and their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. This Y Combinator Fireside Chat was inspired by our UQ Founders Pledge community, a network of like-minded individuals who are keen to give back to UQ and the entrepreneurial community. There are currently 41 founders from across 6 countries who have joined the pledge and have come together through meaningful experiences created to support their startup journey, but also to make it easier for those that follow. If you're passionate about innovation and UQ's vision for creating a more entrepreneurial community and supporting our students with gaining an entrepreneurial mindset, or want to know more about the UQ Founders Pledge, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Emily, Nimrod, or me or any other UQ staff member that's joining the call today, or you can head to the Ventures website, which has more information. Y Combinator, or YC, is the #1 startup accelerator in the world, based, of course, in the Silicon Valley. It's produced a large number of notable startups, including Airbnb, Stripe, Twitch, Reddit, and Dropbox. We have 4 UQ alumni who have had the privilege of being selected to this highly competitive program with us here today. And you'll have an opportunity to hear more about their experiences with this competitive and demanding but very rewarding program. I'd now like to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Camille Soquet-Claire, CEO and co-founder of Bloom Impact Investing. Camille is also one of our iLab alumni, so of course our iLab accelerator program, which is one of very few university accelerator programs in the country. Bloom Impact Investing is an early stage company on a mission to build a carbon-free economy that allows people and the planet to thrive. Camille is helping people invest in climate solutions and learn about sustainable finance so that they can build their wealth whilst making a difference. Camille also runs the Impact Investing and Sustainable Finance Meetup Group. Bloom has recently secured 700,000 capital raise. Welcome, Camille, and over to you. Thank you so much for moderating the panel today.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for the kind introduction, and welcome everyone. I am delighted to be the panel moderator today. Firstly, before we begin, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodianship of the lands where UQ stands. We pay respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging, who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognize the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to play within our community and their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. Again, welcome everyone. I am so delighted to be moderating this wonderful panel with Andrew, Akash, Robert, and Tim. Welcome guys, welcome everyone. So we are all excited to be here today to hear candid stories and insights from your experience. So I'm going to start with your origin story, and I'm going to start with Andrew. Andrew, can you tell us a bit more about your journey from doing your PhD at the same time as being involved with the Oxford University and applying to YC at the last minute?
Yeah, thanks very much. I don't know what I was thinking of at the time because I was juggling far too many things, but in 2015 decided to start Go One with 3 other co-founders, so 4 co-founders in total. And at that point in time, as you noted, I was living in the UK, doing a master's at Oxford University in education, focused on learning and technology. Concurrent to that, I think the University of Queensland thought I was in Brisbane because I was also enrolled in a PhD program, and had the idea at 2 a.m. in the morning to go, look, we should sort of apply for Y Combinator. The applications were closing at 11 a.m. That next morning. And yeah, somehow sort of scurried together with the other sort of co-founders, got our application in. It was a terrible application, but somehow was enough to get that interview spot. And yeah, moved out to Mountain View and launched Go One really off the back of that.
That's wonderful, and it's also a good lesson. Done is better than perfect. So I think you proved this point really well that day. Now I'd love to go to Tim. Can you tell us a bit more about when and why you started GreaseBoss?
Yeah, sure. I'd actually been working on my own startup by myself as a sole founder called Ocean Rovers, and it was a hard slog doing it by yourself. I'll give you that. So a year and a half, I was moving through there. I'd actually recently, I was in one of the UQI lab presentations about 2 years ago. And I went to one of these startup weekends, a hardware accelerator startup weekend in Brisbane. And I was there to actually try and find someone who's got the talent to come and join with Ocean Rovers. And I heard this idea pitched to GreaseBoss, and I knew the market, that these big industrial sites couldn't control their grease in, and it's very expensive. And it just clicked with me. Said that's a huge problem. The customers have money, because I've been working. It was like pushing a boulder uphill trying to sell what I had with Ocean Rovers. I kind of made something and tried to sell it, whereas I saw this. And in that weekend, over that startup weekend, we had a big mine saying, yes, we'll give you $100,000 a year for the system. Lots of people giving us great feedback. So I had to make the hard decision to actually, close down Ocean Rovers and ramp up GreaseBoss with the other two co-founders, because just based purely on that demand, it was clear that it was set to be a winner.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim, for sharing. And can you, for the benefit of the panel, we went straight into the panel, but can you tell us a bit more about GreaseBoss?
Yeah, sure. So GreaseBoss is a system that actually verifies that manual lubrication of industrial equipment is completed correctly. So out on industrial sites like mines or manufacturing sites, incorrect lubrication of machines is actually the #1 cause of equipment failure, which is extremely expensive. And before GreaseBoss, there's no way to actually verify that it's been done correctly. So we've built a unit that is retrofittable on the grease gun, and really just using simple RFID technology and a cloud. It actually measures the amount of grease flow into each grease point and sends it to the cloud. So at the end of the day, the maintenance manager knows that the work's been done correctly.
Thank you, Tim. Now, continuing on the origin story, I would love to go to Robert. Robert, can you please introduce what your company does? And also, I think you have a very interesting personal story that will explain, and I would love you to explain why you started Patched.
Sure. Before I do, just quickly, GreaseBoss is the coolest name for a company I think I've ever seen, Tim. So like, kudos on that. I saw that and I was like, that's such an incredible name. Anyway, so my name's Robert. My name's Robert Quinn. I'm CEO and co-founder of Patched. I started Patched to save my own life. That's not a story many founders get to tell. I had over 18 episodes of sepsis following a liver transplant. Sepsis is a condition which kills 1 in 6 times. So you do the math on that one. The only reason that I'm alive is that I can tell I'm getting sick. I get sore legs and a warm face, and I force my way through the emergency department, which is not something that most people have either willing to do or like have the courage to do or even know to do. And the key to sepsis is treating it early, right? This is a condition which kills more people every year than breast cancer, lung cancer, and prostate cancer combined. And almost no one knows about it, and it's very hard to treat. And the trick is catching it early. So what we realized is, hey, if I can tell I'm getting sick and force my way through the emergency department and save my own life, we can probably use tech to do the same thing for others. So in 2017, in Australia, we started off trying to see if we could predict the onset of sepsis. So we pulled down these gigantic data sets from the United States. And what we found was that we could predict sepsis with more than 8 hours of lead time. And that was 8 hours of lead time on the official definition of sepsis, which is monstrous. Like, it's a huge amount of time. And it means we're probably getting about 24 hours on a clinician. So in a nutshell, that's us. We use artificial intelligence and wearable devices to predict a disease called sepsis in high-risk patients.
Wow, incredible. Thank you so much, Robert. With such a strong why, we can understand why you've started this company and why you've been so successful. Now I'm going to go to Akash. Akash, welcome. Could you please, I guess, tell our audience what Your Choice is all about, and also tell us a bit more about your background in research and how you went from research to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me on this panel. It's really surprising to see how much I have in common with my fellow panelists. Andrew Barnes and I are both ABs. Robert Quinn and I are both in at least the life sciences space. And what's really funny is Tim is developing something for lubricants, and we also develop lubricants. And so, yeah, it's a wild story. So my name is Akash. I went to UQ to do my master's originally in molecular biology. And then I fell out of love of research and realized, I should do something else with my life. I was also just figuring things out in general. And then ended up doing my master's in biotech. And, the story of how we spun out Your Choice is also a bizarre one. I was not a technical co-founder of that company at all. Rather, I was a hired gun to be the CEO and at least raise money for the company. And at the time, when we originally started the company, all we were saying is that we will develop non-hormonal contraceptives for women. That was it. We couldn't think about how to do this for men. We didn't know how we were going to do it. But the vision was we could figure out how to develop non-hormonal contraceptives for women, because we knew most women hate being on the pill or being on some sort of hormonal contraceptive. Subsequently, we found a molecule which shows really great promise. Unfortunately, it didn't work orally for like a pill for women or a pill for men. And so we made a vaginal lube that women could use just before intercourse, and it prevents pregnancy. Yeah, and what's really crazy is that we're also developing the pill for men, a non-hormonal pill that men can take that prevents women from getting pregnant. And Robert has already heard this crazy story yesterday. The vision is that not only can we prevent men from having unplanned pregnancies, but we could also prevent them from infecting women with HIV as well. And so that's the crazy vision of what we're up to.
Wow, Akash, this is setting the bar really high in terms of impact, and that's a beautiful story. Thank you so much. So there is one thing that you all have in common, is that you were successful in going through the YC Combinator, very prestigious startup program that I'm sure a lot of people in the audience look up to and maybe want to go through one day. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what the YC Combinator did for you. But before that, can you take us back to the moment when you applied? Why did you apply? What were you expecting from this program? Anyone can jump in.
I'm happy to jump in on that one to start, just because we have a pretty crazy story of how the YC thing came to be. So when we started the company, I'm going to give a little bit of a background before we joined YC, because I think it's an interesting story, and it highlights just the crazy crap that happens as a founder. But before we joined YC, we had been screwed over by a third co-founder, and the guy had wiped us out personally. We had no money left in the company. I had to borrow money from my parents. I was driving Uber to keep the lights on, to feed myself. So it was kind of a crazy time before we applied to YC. And so I used to pitch everyone that hopped into my car when I was driving, Uber to keep the lights on in the company. And we were just trying to stay alive. And the crazy part that happened was there was an opportunity for a 60-second pitch competition in Sydney. We won it because we'd been practicing so damn much. We'd work 9 to 5 and then drive Uber from 5 to midnight, get up in the morning and do it again the next day. We ended up winning this pitch competition, and that got us in front of a hospital. We convinced this hospital to pay us to conduct a study. And we're like, all right, we need to get out of this. Like, we're clearly we're on a trajectory here that makes a lot of sense. Hospitals are paying us to run studies. And we're like, let's apply to YC. We knew we were a good fit, and we knew the one thing that they loved, because one thing that YC loves is people who like hackers, like people who find ways around and convincing a hospital to pay you to conduct a study is pretty unheard of. And so we sort of went into YC and applied to YC with this whole idea that not only are we the hustlers, we stayed alive despite a co-founder falling out and losing all our cash and everything like that, but we also convinced a hospital to pay us to conduct a study. And that's sort of how we applied, and that was the moment of applying. And we had lots of people backing us to get there. But it was a crazy journey for us to get to that point. And so we were very grateful when we got into YC. But yeah, long story, but. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. I think one point to take away here is that a lot of work and resilience had happened before getting into this. Can we hear from from Akash maybe next?
Yeah, so I have a bizarre story of how we got into YC. So just as a bit of background, we spun the underlying technology out of UC Berkeley, not UQ, but like UC Berkeley. We had been accepted into UC Berkeley's startup accelerator. And we were thinking about whether we should go there. And then we're accepted into IndieBio and we're thinking, oh, should we go there? And then we applied to YC, and I was asked this question of just like, how much money is it going to take to get this to market? And I don't know, man, like, I mean, to be honest, the company that I was in 2018 versus the company that we are today is just like totally different. So I said, I need $500 million. And I don't think that that's a wrong answer. It's just not one it's not really the real cost, your personal cost to bring a therapy to market. And that later that evening, I got the email saying, girl, you did not get in. And it was a bit depressing. It was a bit saddening. And there was maybe a week of just like me wanting to give up very clearly. But I don't know if you've ever watched Pretty Woman, but that moment where Julia Roberts is like, you work on commission, big mistake, huge, is essentially how I live most of my life. And so I essentially said, you know what, I'm going to get my seed round put together without YC. And they will have missed out on 7% of an epic company. And ultimately what happened is I just blasted out a bunch of crazy emails, and Sam Altman found the email, thought this was an amazing idea, said, you should chat to Jared, my partner at YC, who had literally just passed on the technology, and is emailing me saying, oh my God, this is an amazing company. We should accept you on the spot. And I was like, I'm not going to tell him that he literally just passed on us 1 month ago. I'm just going to keep this going. And actually, that's really how we got back into YC. So, we did not belong. We were not meant to have gotten in, but it is just random persistence that keeps you going.
And maybe to build on that, just because people might not understand the whole sort of YC interview process. So you do this sort of long application. I'm sure everyone else sort of put a lot of love, sweat, and tears into it. And if you're international, they would used to sort of pay for your accommodation, fly you across. And I think in the batch we went through, they flew across, I think 1,000 companies, some crazy number. And you can imagine that there might be 2 or 3 co-founders in each of those businesses. And as Akash mentioned, you sort of then put in front of 3 or so YC partners, and you've got 10 minutes and that's it. And then you're out of the room. They email you later that evening to go, look, this sort of monumental decision that comes with it, $100-something thousand of seed investment is decided within 10 minutes. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised, Akash, that they missed you the first time and then thought you were amazing the second time around.
We still got into the same batch, the same people who got interviewed and accepted the same round as us. So I don't think people knew that we were rejected. And actually, I just felt crazy imposter syndrome thinking we do not belong here. But then everyone has a crazy story of how they got into.
Did you end up telling Jared in the end?
Jared, so what's really funny is I kind of like dumbed down the story. The real truth is that Sam Altman sent the email to Jared and said, you should look at this company and you should reevaluate them. At the same time, I had just mass emailed a bunch of random people from a random list that I got. And another YC partner got the email and said, I would use this tomorrow, and emailed it also to Jared and said, you should look at this company. Literally same email address, same everything. And Jared is scheduling a meeting with me on both email threads. And so at one point I basically say like, hey, should we just like blend these 2 meetings together? And he was like, I don't understand what 2 meetings you're talking about. So I am thinking, should I explain to him what we're talking about? So I tried to do this over email. He's not getting it. I said, just forget it. So ultimately, I show up to one meeting, it's a Zoom call, where he's like, oh, okay, yeah. Half an hour later, I show up again and I'm like, hey, same guy, same company, same everything. And he apologizes and is just like, oh, emails are so challenging. It's like, girl, don't you have like the former founder of the co-founder of Gmail, like
Gmail,
running?
yeah.
So yeah, it was, I have the email receipts to prove it. So yeah, it's a crazy story.
That's a great story. And I think, yeah, again, the lesson is keep going. A no is just temporary. I'd love to hear from Tim.
Yeah, so we went through a few accelerators before YC, and the second one was 77 Ventures. So Yotam there from iLab was one of the partners there, and we won that challenge and they invested in us, and we were just working forward leading up to Christmas. And Yotam's been through Y Combinator himself, so he suggested to us, he said, hey guys, like Y Combinator's remote now, like you can apply and the application's due in like a week's time. Like, oh. And we thought, no, we're building hardware for one. We just thought Y Combinator is focusing on B2C, like consumer-based software tech. We're talking to dirty mines and dirty manufacturing, dealing with grease. The guys in Silicon Valley aren't going to like it. And we said, no, just apply. So we threw together our application pretty quickly. Luckily, we'd already done other applications for grants. So that's one tip. When you're doing all these applications, keep all these questions ready, because a lot of the time they pop up again. You can reuse them and be able to throw together some applications pretty quickly. But ran through, and yeah, we were really surprised to get the interview there. We were overwhelmed, and actually, it's funny, Robert, you mentioned about the name Grease Boss. We had the same comments from the guys in our interview, and also all throughout the Y Combinator. It seems the people in America just love the name Grease Boss.
It's very American. It's very like, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and the whole attitude there in Y Combinator is just be a winner, just dominate. So I think they liked it. Yeah. It's we did our 10-minute interview as well, and we literally trained for 2 days straight. The three of us just had questions galore. We're just pinging each other, ready for this, fine-tuning our answers and been perfecting our skills to speak really acutely and get the message across quickly. And then we're waiting for that email because they say they'll email you that night, and they said, oh, we need to have another session tomorrow. So we woke up at the crack of dawn, we practiced for another 6 hours, ready like to get grilled again. And then straight up, opened up the Zoom meeting and said, we want to bring you in. It's like, oh, great. You could have said that in the email, but it was fantastic. Yeah, it was a great feeling.
That's wonderful. And what I love about your story, Tim, is that initially you would have assumed that you wouldn't get in, but you gave it a go, and you went in. So that's a great lesson here as well. So I'd love to, now that we've gone through your origin story and why you applied, can you all tell us a little bit more about your experience going through YC, and particularly, I think I would love to understand what the program has done for you. Do you think you could have achieved, obviously you are all very driven, very passionate about your business. Could you have achieved what you have achieved today without the program? Maybe Robert, you can go first.
Sure, I'm happy to dive into that. Before I jump in, I want to quickly highlight something that I don't think none of us remember to bring up. If you ever apply to YC, there is a way to prep. It's called IPG. It's on GitHub. Look it up. It's a series of questions that you get asked in the interviews. It's probably the most useful prep material. And I can see Tim nodding, Akash nodding, Andrew may or may not have heard of it as well. But it's the pro tip. Anyway, that aside, YC was a phenomenal program for us. I would wager that we probably would have still made it eventually. I would say it's very personal. This is like, starting a company to save your own life. There's another motivator there that's a little bit stronger than I think usual. So I think we would have, but it's a huge accelerator. Like it actually lives up to its name. One of the things that happens in YC is you have sort of these like bi-weekly or weekly dinners. I can't remember. We went through in 2018, so it's been a while. But essentially you meet up with your batchmates, and they have 10,000 companies that apply. They take about 250. And so like the people that you're meeting with are like some of the like biggest hustlers in the world. And they're like, oh, like this week we just did X, Y, and Z. And you're like, crap, we didn't do that. Like, and sort of like it pushes you in a really unique way. And I think that was really useful to me. I would say the biggest value out of YC though is obviously the network. If I want to get in contact with anybody, it's like a couple of emails and I'm in contact with whoever I need to be in contact with. And then the one thing that I think they tell you more now, but when we went through, no one told you, is that YC is just the world's best forcing function to force investors to put money in, because there's this whole belief that on demo day, you close your round. And so like you can use that as a big forcing function to be like, well, we're going to close our round on demo day, but like we, Mr. Investor, we want to let you come in early because we really want you. And so like YC also has this like, there's a bit of, it's really good at creating FOMO for investors, which can be really helpful in closing a seed round. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Robert, for the tip for preparing the application. Very useful. Andrew, can you jump in and tell us about your experience with YC?
Yeah, I'd echo what Robert said. And prior to YC, we were lucky enough to go through iLab with a company that unfortunately was not successful. So we'd had sort of experience with accelerators, and iLab's a great accelerator as well. But Y Combinator has that brand, as you sort of identified, as being really that first accelerator, that sort of preeminent one. And I think one of the interesting things is going in, you sort of might imagine or think, okay, well, look, there's this secret sauce or there's this silver bullet that you're going to sort of understand and learn, and therefore that's how Airbnb or Dropbox or Stripe or Coinbase or other sort of success stories have sort of here's the playbook. And I think what's both sort of exciting but also sort of grounding is the secret sauce is just the basics. It's build something that customers love, focus, don't sort of stretch yourself sort of too far. And I think that was one of the really interesting parts of going through Y Combinator, in addition to what Robert said, it's this sort of time-bound artificial deadline. You get a lot of stuff done, you make this momentum, you've got this sort of great signal to go raise capital. But it's also then just going, hey, look, you've gone through or you're participating in this really renowned accelerator, and the advice that they're giving you is not rocket science. It's the basics, and just do the basics well. And that's how you can build a great sort of business if you create sort of great value in the world. And so I think that's some of the things that stood out for us.
Thank you, Andrew. How about you, Akash?
Yeah, so YC has helped me in a lot of random ways. I met Robert, and my first employee hire at the same networking event pre-COVID, and I would also plus one the fact that, like, you know, I think partners are great, but like your batchmates are actually who hold you accountable and can see through your bullshit day to day, because you can tell a crazy story of what you've done, but the people that are in your group who know actually what you're working on, or the closest people to knowing what you're actually working on, outsiders can keep you really humble to what you have or have not done. And I think that is really great. I can tell one quick story. Hopefully I'm not stealing into Tim's time, but you know, during the pandemic or just before the pandemic, we started a subsidiary of YourChoice Therapeutics. So YourChoice Therapeutics is a company developing non-hormonal contraceptives for men and women. And when COVID hit, we realized that, you know, my co-founder, who's a sperm physiologist, actually got her PhD in infectious biology, and said, you know, I think we could do something for COVID. And we quickly started a subsidiary because, you know, in early March, and it was really challenging to know how bad COVID was really going to be. At least I did not think it was going to be nearly as bad as it ended up being. I thought, you know, I have decks to show that I thought max number of cases in the US were a sub-million over the entire year. I was like royally wrong. So I was just like, you know, we're going to start a subsidiary. You want to go down the COVID journey, go ahead. And we just raised a crazy amount of capital for that subsidiary. Not crazy, but it's like, you know, $6 million for the subsidiary. And I had no path to profitability. I was just like, I have a moral obligation. We have to do the right thing here. That was it. But it was the YC community, and the fact that we were raising completely virtually at that time, it was the YC stamp of approval that allowed us to substantively raise capital, for people to know that we were trustworthy, that we were not just like fly-by-night individuals. And I think yeah, I wonder to what extent in a post-COVID world that kind of stamp of approval might be super valuable. And so that's something I would consider, how you get your chops from whatever mechanism possible. And yeah, and I would say that subsequently, you know, that COVID company was exited, the company that I never knew how I was going to make money exited. And I would also say YC helped orchestrate that exit as well, or at least advised in that exit as well, which I think was super helpful.
Thank you. How about you, Tim? Did you feel the same momentum through the YC branding?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm probably the only one in the batch by the sounds of it who did the remote session. So we did YC remotely. And I can definitely say that the YC stamp of approval is huge. As Robert said, like coming up to demo day, I mean, we've been going through a year of trying to raise capital in Australia, and we got a little bit, but you work bloody hard for it. Over there in the lead up to demo day, there's literally people throwing money at you. Like the bank account starts going like this, and you start turning down deals that you work a year for in Australia. So it's hugely beneficial there to get the seed funding up. But in addition to that, like going forward after, I guess we raise the seed capital and you're moving through and working, it's also huge, as Akash said, as a bit of a proof to your customers that yes, you've got some money behind you. Yes, like you're not fly by nighters. You're a real company. You're going to back this product. You're going to deliver. You've got the resources behind you. It helps get some of the bigger companies like BHP or Rio Tinto to say, hey, yeah, like we're willing to work with you guys now because you're not going to run out of money next month. So it's huge to get your company up and going, but then also credibility going forward, operating your company. And I'll probably say in terms of I guess, how we felt YC rolled out. So we were, and the benefits we got from it, being remote, we didn't have the meet-up dinners, but we did have our groups, but all our sessions started at like 2 a.m. So we would be waking up at like 2 a.m, doing YC in the morning, and then it'd be probably about 4 or 5 o'clock after that finished, because I generally just do small chunks each day, and that was about it. And then go for a quick surf, come into work all day through till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. So we just got used to doing 15 hours of work every day. And just having that momentum of, we've got to keep up with this. Like we've got to make so much progress. This is once in a lifetime opportunity. And I think the main part of the program through YC was, there's the basics of lean startup methodology and all that. And they don't really go through a lot of that because it's kind of assumed that you know that aspect. The big part of it was sell, like, which is what Andrew kind of pointed on as well. Their motto is make something that people want. And if you can get someone to pay you for it, then clearly it's showing that there's a demand in the market that someone will actually pay you for what you've built. So this is worth pursuing. And, being engineers, we said, oh, the product's not ready. We've got to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to do some trials. And they said, go out and sell it, make some money. So, okay. Put on our sales hat and just went hell for leather on getting sales, and it helped us, grow and get some early stage customers. And it's, I guess they just push you to that limit. And as a company, we've kept that momentum going forward of, I mean, not this morning, but yesterday morning, I was awake at 2 a.m, started work at 4, that early routine that the remote work kind of got me into, the remote sessions has been good, and I've maintained it. So yeah, it helps you identify and kind of see what's possible, and yeah, helps that company keep the momentum going forward to keep growing.
Can I quickly touch on something that Tim said there as well that I just want to highlight? He mentioned that YC doesn't teach you how to run a company. He's absolutely right. And there is a resource called YC Startup School. When you want to learn how to run a company, read through that. YC's job is to make you an awesome company. I just wanted to quickly highlight that because like these guys, we went through another accelerator as well that helped us learn how to run a company, but they don't teach you that. So if you're looking for that, it's not the right place.
Maybe I should have gone to startup school. I don't think I've learned how to run a company. But the joke that I would make to Tim, though, is it does seem brutal that he woke up at 4 a.m. The plus here seems like you didn't have to pay Bay Area rent for the 3 months that you were here. So, girl, I think you got on the upside. Yeah,
definitely. No, the investment we got, the process took a long time. We got the money at the end of the program, but it went 100% on our company, not paying rent in Silicon Valley. So the remote option is fantastic. And really, we wouldn't have done it if we had to go to Silicon Valley because our customers aren't there. You know, our customers are dirty mines around here and manufacturing places and construction sites. And I think the glamour of Silicon Valley, we probably would have stood out like a sore thumb. So yeah, the remote option is incredible.
Thank you both. It sounds like you all had a very big shift in mindset as well, in terms of going from, you know, early stage to going hard on sales. I would love to take the conversation back to Andrew. Andrew, did you also experience a shift in your mindset when you went from your experience going through UQ to YC? So can you tell us a bit more about that? And then I would love you to tell us more about how was life after YC?
Yeah, definitely a mindset shift in terms of scale. And so like we'd gone into Y Combinator being very sort of mission driven. My wife's a primary school teacher. Some of the co-founders, like one's a medical doctor, one's a human rights lawyer, and we all sort of wanted to do something that we thought had important impact and where we could run a sort of a successful venture alongside. And so education, which is what our business provides fundamentally, sort of corporate education, we're very sort of focused on, okay, well, that provides an important impact. But the sort of shift in focus, I suppose, or the shift in mindset really was just the sort of scale of what that could be. And I remember talking to Paul Graham, who is one of the sort of original founders of YC, after one of the dinners, and I was sort of describing what we were doing, and he was like, "Oh, that's amazing. That's super exciting. What you should be doing is reinventing the book." And sort of saying that's the most impactful sort of piece of technology in education, and we haven't really advanced much beyond that. You've got the opportunity to sort of go, how do you sort of reinvent the book? And whilst that might sound sort of vague and abstract or whatnot, it sort of really sort of speaks to, I think, how do you take a problem and really think of it in an unconstrained environment, and then yes, like work your way up towards that. Don't sort of jump steps, build something that customers love, generate a real business through revenue and whatnot. But I think that was not an uncommon sort of approach when you're sort of talking to someone. They try and sort of challenge it to go, okay, well, how could you make that 10x bigger in that regard?
Thank you, Andrew. And sorry, follow-up question for you, Andrew, as well. Did you shift it from having Australian advisors to US-based advisors after going through YC, or what was it like to grow your company going from Australia to the US? I think you've traveled a lot at the beginning.
And advisors being sort of, I suppose, formal advisors in terms of accountants, lawyers, or sort of advisors being sort of general people in the network, or all of the above? All of the above. Yeah, so we prior to going into YC, we had an Australian PTY Ltd that we flipped into a Delaware C Corp. So we had the Australian subsidiary, we had the US parent co, and we maybe as a sort of a quick summary for everyone who might not be familiar on the call, we now employ about 300 people around the world. So we're across sort of Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, the United States, the UK, South Africa. We employ people, Vietnam, other parts of the world as well. And so we've got operating entities and subsidiaries and all sorts of things. So the sort of on the technical advisory front, we necessarily need to work with people across all those different jurisdictions. From a sort of board of directors, the sort of advisors that we have to the business, I think we're lucky in many ways that whether it's through Y Combinator or through UQ or through just other networks of founders, quite often people are quite generous with their time. And so some other Australian sort of startups like Lucania from Safety Culture or Didier from Culture Amp, when we were starting the business, when we were getting our Series A term sheets, I could ring them up, call them, ask them what they learned and the mistakes they made. And since had the opportunity to connect and meet with some very successful people in the US through investors, we now have Microsoft, Salesforce, Seek, SoftBank, a range of Madrona as investors in the business. And so you sort of start small, you sort of work within the network, within YC, within the sort of network that you build, and then over time, it's suddenly become one where we've got sort of quite a really strong group of people to connect with, and I'd say most people are quite generous with their time, so just reach out, talk to them, and people are happy to give advice.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And it's wonderful to see that you have now such a global network, obviously. I would love to go around the room and ask if you could please share with the audience your top tip for founders who really want to elevate their mindset from being a small early venture in Australia to being a global company. What things can they go through? What action can they take today to get there? Who wants to go first? Maybe Robert or Tim?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to do in a quick session, but I guess I think it is starting with that big picture in mind and truly believe in it. I mean, following up from what Andrew said, before we got into YC, us as three co-founders, we had the mission, said we're going to be $100 million company in 5 years. Once we got into YC, they very quickly said to us, well, we only invest in $1 billion companies. You know, what we think could be $1 billion company. So, you know, it very quickly changed their mindset, and we started looking at, wow, actually this market is really huge, and we can do this. There is a pathway. So I think firstly, it's starting to believe that from the beginning. And then I think secondly is probably use the networks that are already around. I mean, as I mentioned, Yotam through UQ, like he's the one who connected us through into Y Combinator. There's like throughout Australia, we've got a number of great connections and great mentors. And I think you go to some of these events such as this one and other events, and you probably don't know it at the time, but some of the people you meet down the track can pull huge levers for you or do amazing things that you don't really know or appreciate at the time. But I guess my biggest tip there would be to go to the events, meet as many people as you can, and try and keep that network close. I mean, it was a startup weekend, as I said, that I went to try and meet a co-founder essentially for my old startup and spawned Grease Spice. You just never know what the opportunity is going to be. So I think, yeah, just have that global mindset from the beginning and take every opportunity. I think it's a lot of hard work. You have to be ready for that.
Thanks, Tim. How about you, Robert?
So I would just quickly highlight that we're in the medical devices space, so we're still fairly small, like a very small team. We've raised a chunk of cash because there's lots of clinical work to do, but I wouldn't say we're a big company by any stretch, obviously. What I will say though is that I think it's critical to get, and this may be less of the case now than it was 4 or 5 years ago when we were in Australia, but the Australian startup ecosystem, it's getting better. It's always getting better, but it was still very like young when we were there. And like when we were there, we were getting people, and like we were thinking like an Australian company. And what I mean by that is like we were getting offers for like, oh, like we'll give you, this money on a $2 million Australian valuation. And I mean like, that's nothing. And like at the time we were like, wow, that's so amazing. And then we went through YC, and at the end we were closing like checks on a $12 million $12 million US capped safe, right? And this is in 3 months. There's no way that we increased more than 8 times in valuation in 3 months. But it's about reframing and realizing that like a lot of it for us was realizing that why can't we just do X, Y, and Z? And asking that question, why can't we just go through YC, right? Like we're two guys from like small country towns, like we're very much not in this mindset. And no one, like I have one of my family members went to university, right? Like that's sort of like the frame of reference I'm coming from. And like this question of like, what if, like why couldn't I just go into Y Combinator? Why can't I just raise $1 million, $2 million, $3 million? You know what I mean? Now the question is the challenge and it's always a challenge for someone like me that doesn't come from this background. Like what if, like, why can't I just raise an $8, $10 million Series A? I can. Right? Like there's no reason why I can't, and sort of shifting that mindset and I guess seeing what's possible. And that's where YC and other groups like this become extraordinarily powerful, is you meet people and like you sit down and you have coffee and it's like, I met with Akash like yesterday. He's like, oh yeah, like I exited my company in 9 months. Like what the you know, like it's just like insane, and it's not something you ever even consider or think about. And so like what I would say is to a lot of Australians, particularly if you come from a rural area or like you don't have that experience of like you can be a Silicon Valley company, you can build $1 billion business, like all these things are possible, and believe that it's possible. And then ask yourself, like, if that is the case, if it's true that it is possible, what would I have to do to achieve that? And then like start trying to see that, you know, try that stuff. You never know, it might work, right? Like we'll just throw an application into YC. We'll ask this hospital if they'll pay us to conduct the study. And guess what? They say yes most of the time. And one of the biggest hacks I think I ever did, and I did this after we got into YC, this is like a bit further down the road, but it accelerated this more than I think anything else I've done, is something called rejection therapy. Look it up. You'll find some guy on YouTube. He's done a TED talk about it. It's fantastic. Basically, go up to people and ask them questions that you know they're going to say no to. It helps you build your confidence in just asking for ridiculous things. And so, like, you know, I asked my Uber driver if I could drive. You know, it's like crazy shit. Like you get into this mindset of just like asking, right? And it helps you a lot. Anyway, so that's my pro tips.
Thank you, Robert. Wait, I think we're all gonna Google rejection therapy after this session. Actually, you're giving me a perfect segue to my next question. I think there's a thread.
I'll quickly also just add something here, but I will say that it's perhaps really hard to follow after all of that gusto that Robert had in his response. But I will say, just to build on what Robert said, is that you know, I don't think that there's anything special about me. No offense to Andrew, Robert, or Tim, like, but there's nothing special about any of the 4 people that are on this screen. Camille, I don't know you that well, so I'm not going to say that there's nothing special about you. Maybe there is, but I think it is more right so. I think it's more of, I think, figuring out whether you want to do shitty work for a while and push a boulder over a hill. Like that's the real question that you have to ask yourself, because like, you know, we get to tell ourselves a glamorous story of like, oh my God, there was an exit in 9 months, but it's like, you know, I know what happened during that period. I know how dirty I got during that 9-month period. And, you know, so I think the question was there something that really changed your ability or changed your vision? And I think that for me, there are 2 things. I rarely think that I'm the smartest person in a room. And so what I try and do is I try and constantly surround myself with people that I think are 10 times smarter than me, so that I can learn very quickly from what someone else is doing, regardless of whether it's in my space or not, and just apply it in some way, either personally, because if you work on yourself personally, you professionally will also improve. So I think that's something that I think is a hack that I had otherwise never thought about. But I think, yeah, surrounding yourself by smart people such that you're able to achieve more, I think is really important. And the second thing that I would think that also ties back into what Robert said is to also realize that literally everyone else that has become successful literally put their pants on the same way that you do. They also go to the bathroom the same way that you do, right? There's like literally nothing special about them. And thinking about how you can go down a similar path. So I will just say about, you know, just how this relates to YourChoice Therapeutics. My background was in IP licensing, and I don't like failing. So my vision for YourChoice Therapeutics when we got into YC was, you know, all I'm going to do is I'm going to discover the pill for men and I'm going to sell it to a large pharmaceutical company. My job is done. I know I can meet, like the path was very easy, and I knew I could achieve it and be successful. What I think subsequently happened by surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me is that I could then see what they did and start thinking, well, you know, do I ultimately have to sell this molecule to Bayer or someone else and develop, you know, and just end my story there? Or can I create a behemoth biotech company and do this on my own? And I don't think I would have had the confidence to even have that vision had I not surrounded myself with people who had, you know, for example, started Hims and Hers, and essentially think about how can I take the lessons that they learned for their company and apply it to what I'm doing. And so I think everyone in some degree is saying like your your network around you is important. I don't think that it necessarily has to be a bunch of, like-minded or startup-like people. It's just someone that motivates you to continue working harder and be better.
Thank you, Akash. I think we're touching on a very interesting topic here that is core to entrepreneurship, which is personal growth and resilience. I'd love to turn back to Andrew. Can you share with us your personal toolkit to push the boundaries of your personal growth and resilience?
Probably two sort of anecdotes that when I think of sort of resilience come to mind, and maybe just to sort of frame why resilience is important, and sort of linking it back to Y Combinator. In the first day of Y Combinator, they sort of ran a session for our batch and was sort of sharing a bunch of different sort of points from all the YC partnership. And I think it was Sam Altman at the time was describing the sort of two core criterion that they would use to select companies. And this was in 2015. He was saying previously they'd sort of had sort of intelligences or capability as the core attribute that they were looking for. And if you're really capable in one pursuit, then they felt it was fungible to other pursuits. So if you'd sort of achieve success in sports or in sort of an academic world or in other sort of business pursuits, and they felt that that was a good signal to whatever startup you're working on. And he said, look, that's still important, but the more important attribute that they've identified is resilience and grit and the ability to pick yourself up and sort of come back at it the next day. And I'd sort of echo what Akash was just saying. You need to realize that it's just hard work, and it's sort of this sort of cliche and platitude, but it is just pushing that boulder uphill for many, many years, and continues to be that way. The boulder just gets bigger and different shaped and sizes. And sort of long answer to a short question, but one of the stories which I think sort of from a personal perspective, at an early age, I sort of was learning some of those things that had done really well during school. And so that wasn't sort of necessarily an environment of adversity, but also was playing sport. And so I love soccer, football, and I was, I think, 11 or 12 years of age at the time. And our team had won a number of sort of finals. We were doing really well. And then for whatever reason, the next year, a lot of the sort of cohort left. They moved interstate or into different locations. And I was the team captain for that next year. And we lost basically every game 11 or 12 or 14-0. And for people that don't know soccer, like a high scoring game is like 3 goals. So losing by double digits was just soul destroying. And like that it sort of sounds trivial, but that was a great environment to learn, to sort of get back up, say, okay, well, look, we needed to turn around the next week and front up again, and do it all again. And so, yeah, Akash, you're right. A high scoring soccer game is sometimes even a single goal. So yeah, double digit goals against you is pretty crushing.
Thanks, Andrew. Obviously, a good analogy between sports and entrepreneurship, a lot of things in common. I think it is now time to turn to the audience for questions. So I would love to encourage everyone in the audience to type questions into the chat, and I will ask directly our speakers today. But before I don't think there's any in the chat just yet, so I might continue on the personal growth topic a little longer. I think something that I would love to learn about you all is that what kept you going? So we've talked about resilience, but can you tell us more about stamina? Andrew, you've been in business for a little while, and as you said, the boulder gets bigger and bigger. So what kept you going? And then maybe we can go to Tim.
I think life's too short to do something that you don't enjoy. So what's kept me going is fundamentally very passionate about what we do. I think there's so much sort of opportunity in the space, and so whilst running a startup is a roller coaster and some amazing sort of highs and some crushing lows. If you enjoy what you're doing, if you've got a great team to work with, then that's a reason to sort of keep going.
How about you, Tim? Where does your stamina come from? Is it just the surf, or what's your other tips?
I guess my and echoing what Andrew said there around grit. There's a great book called Grit. I recommend everyone reads that, and that's about why just chipping away makes such a difference. But I grew up with two older brothers, so I've been used to competing all my life. But for me, the endurance is. I started originally my entrepreneurial decision to move away from working, as an engineer in companies to do my own thing in 2015. After, I'd had two really inspirational entrepreneurial bosses and I was working directly with them, and I thought, I want to be that guy building my own empire, which I think everyone probably on this call has got that kind of drive, right? They want to at least shape their own future a bit. So that was part of the key driving factor for me. And as Andrew said, you want to do what you want to spend your life enjoying going to work. I found that monotony and working some of these other jobs, I'd wake up in the morning, not want to go. I wake up now and I can't wait. I get out of bed at 2 a.m. to start working, right? I love it. So, but I think a good thing to point out is I started in 2015. My wife and I sold our house and moved to Fiji and set up an eco resort out in the islands. Like, big move, off we went. And a year and a half later, had to come back with the tail between the legs, lost a lot of money for various reasons, but had the experience of my life. Like, I don't regret it, but just failing, taking that risk, taking a big plunge, failing, learning from it. I came back and, saddled up again and started Ocean Rovers and chipping away at that for a year and a half. And ultimately, I guess that failed in the end because I closed it down for this. But I think it's been, able to have that rejection therapy. Like, it's okay to fail. I don't think you can expect your first startup to be, or anything you do first up to be the winner. But as long as you pick yourself up and keep going,
Tim,
and
speak
learn
for yourself.
don't just stop. Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like you guys all just nailed it with your first one, but
Nah.
I might be the odd one out here. But I think don't be afraid to fail. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Yeah.
Tim, I think you're giving me the perfect opportunity to link to a question that was asked by the audience. Can we actually look at your personal journey? I think obviously building a startup comes from some personal sacrifices. And it's not easy to manage a company whilst having thriving relationships and friendships and so on. So can we hear from you all about this topic? What personal sacrifices have you made along the way?
Once we came back from Fiji, we decided to start a family. So I started my first entrepreneurs program, the Startup On-Ramp, 2 weeks before my first son was born. So first child coming in and I was just starting this business. So it was wake up at 5 a.m. then to go and get out of bed, leave the little fella in bed and go and work for 2 or 3 hours before I had to start my day job. So that was hard, having to spend that time away from, newborn family. And it's just been, so many weekends and so many nights that I still prioritize spending time with my family, but you have to make that sacrifice. I have to go out and do this. I have to work this weekend. Sorry, I can't see the family. And then going through YC, our second child, a little daughter, she was born in January. So the first month of Y Combinator. So I had 2 days off in the hospital with my wife. And at that point we were working out of my garage. So we came home from hospital with this, 3-day-old baby, open up the garage, and there's the team. They're in my garage making grease plus units. So I go in, put my wife into the bedroom with our little baby and back out to the garage and start working. I had guys staying in our house that night. So it's been a big sacrifice on that front. But that being said, I guess we're getting to a point now, once we've hit some of these milestones, we've got a bit of credibility that now, for the most part, got to a point where I can have my weekends to myself, and every moment that I'm not working, I'm with my family. So it's worth it to have, I can switch off, do family time, switch on, do business time. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm really excited to go to work. It makes a huge difference. Like, the sacrifice is definitely worth it in the long run, I think.
Thanks, Tim. It's really interesting to hear the real story behind the shiny success. There's always those sorts of stories. Can we hear maybe from Robert? What is your journey with I guess personal sacrifices and things you have to deal with?
I mean, so you sacrifice a lot, and I think this speaks to like another question you brought up earlier around like resiliency and stamina, and like there's a lot there. Like it's obviously a very big topic, but what I would say is having a bigger mission helps making some of the personal sacrifices a little easier. And there is absolutely personal sacrifices, but there also doesn't have to, like, you can choose your personal sacrifices as well, right? I mean, for us, obviously, like financially, it was like crazy bad decision, right? Like, I have friends earning $250,000 right now who are same educated as me, like in the United States, earning shitloads of cash. And, you know, startups are just a terrible way to make money, but you have a larger mission, right? And so like, that's something I will say, like, obviously you sacrifice like salary and things like that. I think a lot of people make the mistake of sacrificing friends and time with friends. And I think that costs them dearly. And I think a lot of the successful founders that I know find a way to manage that. But you still, at the same time, you do still have to make personal sacrifices. And at different stages, you make different levels of personal sacrifice. I would say at the very start of the company, I saw almost no one. Like, I mean, we were working both days of the weekend. I mean, it was crazy. But then, you know, once we'd raised some capital, things changed for us. And it is very much a marathon, not a sprint. But you do absolutely have periods of sprinting as well. So I don't know, it's a very hard question to answer. But I think personal sacrifice varies depending on stage of company.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to ask a question and ask you all to answer in a few words, okay? So there's 2 questions in the chat from the audience about things that you wish you had done differently. There's one question that refers to your YC application, and there's one question that refers to managing your business as a whole. So can we go from maybe Andrew to Akash to Robert to Tim?
YC application probably wouldn't change anything because I'm sure it was terrible, but we got in and that's enough. On the business, I think we worked out sort of the distribution side being super important a couple of years into the journey. And so had I had that sort of insight when we started, I think we'd be sort of a couple of years ahead of where we are now. But sometimes you just need to continue experimenting, iterating. So sometimes the mistakes are part of the journey and part of the learning as well.
How about you, Akash?
So, you know, I think the YC application is dumb. Like, or it's like my application was dumb. And if I look, I have looked at it recently, and I think I was dumb. But I think there's actually a point that Andrew made, Robert made, and Tim made that I think I just want to highlight for like how shitty starting a company is. Like, if you want to make a shit ton of money, a startup is not the smartest way to go. You can make a lot of money a lot faster, a lot easier, and have none of the pain associated with starting a company. So really, it is the mission that will get you out of bed. And I would also say, like, don't start a company for gold, God, and glory, because those 3 things don't do anything. It is really, you have to be willing to pull yourself out of bed every day. Because the other point that I would make is that there are peaks and there are troughs, but they happen within moments of one another. So we raised our largest, we closed $1 million check one day, literally on a Wednesday for one of the companies. And an hour later, I got bad news. I did not celebrate the fact that I had closed the biggest check that I'd ever closed in my life. I was just like, you know, focused on the low of the low. And I think that is the biggest mistake, is that, you know, at least for me as a person, I focus so much on the negative, and never, the positive is supposed to happen. I expect that from myself, but I don't celebrate. I rarely celebrate the successes that I've had. And I think that's the biggest weakness. And I think, you know, now that we're perhaps more funded, we have way more success under our belt, it's easier to rationalize celebrating the successes that we've had and how much the team as a whole sacrifices for the mission that we're moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Robert, what have you done that you wish you didn't along the way?
So YC application, I mean, we got in, so I'm not going to change anything, because if you change stuff, you might not. You never know what they're looking for. So that's what I'm just going to throw that one out there. In terms of changing something about like company and company journey, what I will say is having more faith in myself. And I mean, and the perfect example of this is an employee we kept too long. Like, I knew that like we probably needed to fire this person, but I'm like, they're one of the best in the field. They're just not a good culture fit. And like, just having the confidence in myself, and like, not just me, like my co-founder as well, right? Like, we're like, oh, it's the first time. Like, what do we like? Do we really know? Have like, back yourself. You know what I mean? Like, we should have fired this guy earlier than we did. And like, I don't know, I would definitely have done that differently. I would have fired him on day 2 rather than, you know, day 330. Because I think it caused a lot of, like, he did a lot of good stuff for the company, but it caused a lot of problems as well. So I don't know, I'd have the guts to fire, you know, to believe in yourself and like trust your decision here. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Back yourself. Thank you.
Back yourself, yeah.
How about you, Tim? You had several entrepreneurial experience, so I'm sure there's things that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, so I guess around the YC application, there's probably, you know, it worked. So I was thinking it's pretty hard to decide what to change. But probably the one thing I'd say was, don't think like an Australian company. When you do your TAM, like your market size, don't think of Australia. You have to go global, and then the figure will seem ridiculous. And I feel like such an idiot doing this total addressable market. It's $100 billion a year. But ultimately, that's what Silicon Valley wants to hear. They don't want to invest in something with a $200 million market. So don't let put the fantastical Silicon Valley hat on while you're doing those types of figures. And then around business, I think some of the mistakes that we made, I mean, we build hardware, right? So hardware and software, but I guess just we stayed too operational and rush. Sometimes you have to hack something together and you know, make the first prototype in a month, right? But I guess once we got into YC, we said, all right, we're in the process of redesigning our second unit there. And we cut a few corners early on. I mean, in terms of design, we have to get this done. We set ourselves this time frame that was probably too short when we didn't have to be that tight. We blew it out anyway, but instead of putting on a bit more thinking, a bit more planning early on, we made some design mistakes, and then ultimately it handicapped us because the product was not sellable. Like, it worked for trials, but we said we can't scale this product. There's some fundamental hardware issues. We've now got to go through a whole other design process to up-rev this into the next one that we're only really getting out now. So it's taken us 6 months to really overcome that problem, which is a bloody long time. So yes, like hack things together and do the minimum viable product, but also take a bit of time just to put on a bit of a planning hat, do a bit of risk assessment, and make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot by hacking it too hard. If you can take an extra 2 weeks or something to do the project, but you know, just future-proof it and do that kind of risk assessment of the project early on makes a huge difference, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Yeah, we don't often talk about risk management, but it's a really good point. And it's a fine balance between going fast and great point. Thank you. I would love to once again merge 2 questions from the audience, and these relates to the differences between the Australian ecosystem and the US ecosystem. And Maritza asks, what can UQ do better to support our aspiring entrepreneurs? And how do we take our iLab accelerator to the next level? So with your, I guess, US and Silicon Valley experience, can you share some of your, I guess, recommendations for the UQ and the, I guess, Australian ecosystem community?
I'm happy to jump in on this one to start, if that would be helpful. So I think EQ is already starting to do the right things in that showing that this is possible. I mean, that's not something that we had when we were there. It just wasn't what no one was talking about it, right? Aside from a handful of accelerators in Australia when we started. I think a lot of other people would see that as well. But just knowing that this US ecosystem is available, there are Australians that have made it. That's great, amazing, cool. If we can make it, you can too. Fantastic. That's really, I think it's about network and seeing that, and like just we're available, right? Like, you can having people able to reach out that are other actual entrepreneurs keen to do this sort of stuff. I think that network is invaluable to help the Australian ecosystem move along. So that would be my thought on that.
You cannot be what you cannot see. So the first step is making you very visible so that other can be inspired, for sure. Andrew, maybe next, what do you think?
I think echoing what Robert was saying, I think UQ's certainly sort of really leading in this sort of space in an Australian context. And I think the Australian sort of ecosystem is sort of in a much better, well, in a much more sort of understanding of sort of technology businesses in general. We've sort of seen, I suppose, the success of Atlassian or Canva or other sort of stories in that space, and so I think there's sort of that general acceptance, but it's not to the same level, particularly as the West Coast of the United States. Still, there's just greater access to capital. There's tighter networks. There's all of that, and so I think an area both for the country at large and UQ as sort of the microcosm within that is how do you just decrease the sort of degrees of distance? How do you sort of plug people together, connect people? And I think it's about how do you get past, like, it's great to sort of jump on Zoom calls like this and everyone can share some sort of generalisms. But I think what becomes much more valuable is sitting down for a coffee, having a look at someone's sort of website or product, or they've got that someone's looking to raise capital. You can sort of do introductions. How do you get into the weeds? And I think just the opportunity to dive into the weeds and decrease the degrees of distance is an area that I think would be useful for ecosystems, both small and large.
A shout out quickly here, following on from Andrew there about like getting like physical, like being and experiencing that. Shout out to Nimrod's program for that. I would say the students that have gone through that have been like, had some incredible experience.
Yeah, and also kudos to Andrew, who and all of you who have been involved with the UQ mentoring program. It's exactly what you said, Andrew, being, I guess, closing the gap between people who know and people who are seeking answers. Akash, can you share your views maybe about what UQ and the Australian community do today to, I guess, be even more ambitious and think global?
Maybe I can't say that there's something that I think UQ needs to do, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that I didn't gain at least some part of the confidence that I had for what I was doing because of my time at UQ. So much of, like, to be very honest, my career in IP licensing was started because I went to UQ, then worked at UniQuest, which then allowed me to go do this at UC Davis, which then allowed me to go to UC Berkeley, which is where I met my co-founder. And like the Y Combinator or whatever started this reaction was something that happened at UQ. And so, but if I were to say that any ecosystem needs to do something, I think ecosystems can only help you or act as like a catalyst for the activation energy of you doing whatever work you have to do. But at the end of the day, it's kind of on the individual whether they want to seek out the help or do the work to get them wherever they need to go. Like, I don't think MIT spins out a lot of companies because they make it easier for companies to spin out. It is just there's a community of individuals that happen to be there that are willing to do a lot of work. And I think that just becomes like, if you, the individual, or if there's a culture there that exists of individuals who want to do a lot of crazy work and work a lot of crazy hours for who knows what.
Yeah, so I'll probably jump in there. My thoughts are, I haven't been through the I Love Accelerator. I didn't get accepted a couple of years ago. So I can't say for what the program is, but I'd been through a few before that. And I started to find that some of them started, it regurgitating the same lean startup methodologies, which is incredibly powerful, right? You need to learn that stuff early on. But I guess the way that YC does it, as I said, they've got the YC Startup School. You can watch all the videos on the lean startup methodology and those tips and tricks. I think is having these accelerators to go beyond just, beyond that content, but to do something like what Y Combinator does, and that's to really push for the sales, to really, I guess, challenge your thinking and think outside the box, and have that individual kind of one-on-one time where it's not just, here's the content, just learn it and off we go. But also UQ's an amazing university and it's got an incredible network. And I think everyone on the call here has said that the network at Y Combinator is probably one of the most powerful parts. I don't think there's any reason why, and I know the UQ Founders Pledge is a great start to it, and I should probably sign myself up. But yeah, I think that's the best way to, I guess, start building that community within UQ, because there's amazing UQ people all around the world doing great things. And if that UQ could harness that network through its entrepreneurial program, it's those types of connections that can help get a trial. A paid trial for a startup means the world. If it's just reaching out to the right UQ alumni who's in that as a business or is working for somewhere who can help tee something up, that's what I guess could be life and death for a startup. So that's probably how I think it could be. Yeah.
Can I just quickly add to what Tim said? Because I think everyone wants to help. There's like literally no one who hears that someone needs help and is just like sitting there with their arms folded and saying like, nah, man, I'm not going to help this person. Like everyone wants to help. You just have to give an actionable item for which we can help. And then everyone is willing to help out however we can.
Thank you. We have 3 more minutes before I'm going to hand the session over back to Emily to close this beautiful panel today. So I might close up with the question from Arkit. I'm not too sure how to pronounce your name. Apologies in advance, but I think it's a very interesting question about gut feel and market insight. So the question is, when you know in your gut that a certain problem exists and will exist in the future, however, the market has not matured yet, so you have some sort of insights into the future, should we pursue that idea or pick something else up?
I feel like, at least, sorry for stealing this from other people, but I feel like this resonates very clearly with me.
For sure.
I will tell you, most people will, it's very clear people don't care about women's health. And so when you say you're going to develop a non-hormonal contraceptive, the response that you'll hear is like, well, women have an IUD, women could use a diaphragm, men can wear condoms, like those, it is true. All of those are non-hormonal contraceptives. But this idea that there's clear data that suggests 70% of women are willing to get off the pill every year because of how shitty the pill is clear enough data to suggest that there's a need to innovate here. And it's the question of who's going to do the work. I'll tell you the flip side, because the flip side is not any better. You say, I'm going to develop the pill for men. And women say, yeah, men are never going to take this. Men will say, oh yeah, but I can use withdrawal. Oh, this is a woman's problem. This is that. You'll hear people have shit to say about random ideas all the time. But if you have that insight, like for example, it's very clear, 70% of men, of heterosexual men say that they would take a non-hormonal pill such that they could have intercourse without a condom. The data is very clear and from multiple sources. And so it's just a matter of really sticking to your guns and saying, if I build it and I continue to make stepwise progress towards building it, that I can continue to prove that ultimately upon approval, this product is going to be kick-ass. And yeah, that is what I believe.
Thank you. I knew you were going to jump on this question. Unfortunately, that's all what we have time for today. So I would love to thank you all for coming today and sharing your very valuable lessons. I'm going to hand it over to Emily now.
Great. Thank you so much, Camille, and all our guest speakers. I'll also invite Maritza to say a few words as well. Thank you.
I know everybody's super busy, and I really thank you for taking the time, for those that are in Australia, to sort of get up early and be in these 1.5 hours call and learn about this amazing story. So I'm not going to take much more of that, but just to say thank you everyone for attending, and of course our amazing speakers and our moderator for their precious time. I will be in touch with our speakers and our moderator today just to confirm addresses so we can send them a little something as a token of appreciation for your time today. So thank you everyone for being here, and reach out anytime, to connect with us, to meet our students, to be part of our programs. We're here for you, and we hope to do much more in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I ask maybe Emily or Maritza, what's next for UQ? Any other events in the pipeline if the community wants to connect again?
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's right.
Yeah.
So I know there's so much from the venture space from my side that I sit centrally in our alumni and relations office. We have UQ Giving Day. We're going to have the iLab Accelerator as our fund to raise money to hopefully grow the number of participants in the program. So we will be doing that next month, and we'll share how you can participate, pretty much just to help us spread the word about this amazing day. So that's just a quick one, but there are so many activities happening.
Yeah, and iLab 2022 is now open. So if you are interested, do have a look at the iLab page on the Ventures UQ website as well. Take a look. We've got a number of information sessions coming up that we'll be hosting. So if you're interested in that, get in touch. And we've got also just numerous other community events. So we are hoping to do more in-person events as soon as we can here in Brisbane, but otherwise we're definitely going to be doing more online sessions like we've got this morning. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to our panel. Thank you, Camille. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good
Great
day.
to have you all. Bye, everyone. Thank you.